Hey guys, I'm not sure if I'm live. It's my first time using this technology, but I'm going to try it. Dirk Knudsen with you. Let me just take a moment to check my technical specs. And if I'm not live, well, then you're going to know I'm not live, I guess. Just check my screen. Hey, I see myself. Okay. If it's a little laggy, you'll have to excuse me. Just check my screen. Hey, I see myself. Okay. Okay. If it's a little laggy, you'll have to excuse me. I can see it's working. So I'm going to jump in. I'm using some technology so that I can live stream on Facebook and tell you all a little bit about my story about tonight. I don't usually go on camera like this, so I'm going to go off in just a minute. I'm going to bring up the blue screen here so that I can live stream on Facebook. So I'm going to turn off Facebook, and here we go. Stand by. Okay. I think we're good. I think I'm still on. I turned my camera off, so you should be seeing a blue screen, The Legend of Diamond Bill. The greatest scallywag. I might have spelled that wrong. I don't know. This is Dirk Knudsen with you. I guess I'm president-elect of the Hillsboro Historical Society. Go HHS. So in my job there, I'm going to be doing a lot of work just to tell you guys have seen I've been bringing you stories as much as I can. I mean, the only thing I can do during the COVID virus is try to take care of my family, take care of my friends. I'm helping out a few of you here in the community. But the stories are important, and I want you all to think about your Hillsboro story and your Washington County story, and what can you add to the site, and what can you kind of bring. I want you to all learn something tonight. This is going to be really fun, believe me. Stay with me for at least 10 minutes. After that, it might get really in-depth. But this story is too good to not tell. And I've been wanting to tell this story for a long time. I put 6 hours in today, and I've got another 10 or 12 hours reading and stuff, preparing for this. I am wearing, tonight I'm wearing the glasses that I found in the remains of the estate I'm handling of Dr. Charles O. Wells. Now, you've all heard me talking about the Wells family. I lost my reading glasses, and I can't believe it. They're too small for my head, but the doc and I had the same exact prescription. I've never had the clarity. These glasses were put in here in 1954. This is a little bonus feature tonight. I happened to find them when I needed to get the story going. So with that said, Dirk Knudsen, let's talk about the legend of Diamond Bill. Okay. So over to my overhead. Let me work on this. You see in the first screen, let's go to number 2. All right. This starts with the story of the Barrett house. Okay. Now, the Barrett house, most of you in Hillsboro are going to see that and go, oh, I love that house, or I've seen that house. That house is at 183 Southeast 6th Street in Hillsboro, Oregon, right on Washington. This is kitty corner or caddy corner, depending on how you say it, from the old Hanks Thriftway. The Miller Education Center is directly across the street to the south. This is a house that I have a long-standing love affair with because I used to dream about owning this house when I was a kid, and I was able to buy this house in the early 2000s or late 1990s. I lose my train of thought, but I bought this house as a rental, one of my first rentals, and I don't have a lot of rentals, but this was my first entree into buying a historic building before I bought the Orinco drugstore where I live now. This house is an American Foursquare. It has unbelievable architecture. I bought it from Dr. Tim Gard, who some of you may know. He's an eye doctor in Hillsboro. Terrific man, and he bought it from Ross Matthews, and Ross Matthews, I believe, bought it from Dr. Marvin Robb, or from the Robb family. One of their homes is right next to it on 6th Street. So it's an American Foursquare. It had all those classic things that you want to see in a house. It has a full wrap porch. The first picture here is from 6th Street, kind of looking through the shrubbery at the east facade. It has a half attic, but it's a false attic. And then the second picture is looking from Washington to the north. So tremendous house, about 2,400 feet, detached garage on the left, which you can kind of see through the bush there on the far left. And I just so loved having this house. The goal with me owning this house was, as a realtor, this was going to be my Hillsboro entree, hometown boy real estate company. and a place to hold, corporate events and historic things. And the wraparound porch that's on both sides is tremendous. It's a raised porch. So I love the house. The house had some intricacies and some quirks that were particularly cool about it. It was built in 1912, so it wasn't quite an arts and crafts or a craftsman, but it was a great house all the same. And there was a funny room in the house, which later people told me Ross Matthews used to bring people home and kind of keep them there during his time as a mortician. I don't know if that was true either, but that was always said to me. Okay, let's see. Messing with technology again here. Okay, so the home though is relevant because of not only the style, and it's the American four-square style, a very symmetrical house, has very specific design criteria. The roofs are very symmetrical. It's got the little false dormers and the big chimney up through the middle of it. You see all that. But the real history behind it here at the start of this page talks a lot about the fact that the home was built for W.W. Barrett, who bought the lot in 1887 for $840. When they did the cultural resource form on this, because it is a protected home, and I should say, I don't own this house anymore, much to my chagrin and my regret. I had this house for 5 years. During the light rail construction, the access to my home was blocked. The construction broke some of the foundation and the windows. I had a long-standing argument going on with TriMet. I lost the home because I was unable to rent it for over 2 years and took a loss on the property. So to this day, I regret having sold it, but it is owned by a church who does outreach work there. That's who I sold it to, so I'm grateful for that. So the W.W. Barrett built the home, and then we're going to get into his son, Diamond Bill William. Okay, so I'm going to leave this document up for just a second, but I'm going to provide you guys with these slides. So let's move on. W.W. Barrett was a prominent man of Hillsboro, okay, a.k.a. also known as Senator William Barrett. He was born in Washington County in 1855, so we're talking about a very early pioneer in Barrett. He went on to attend the Tualatin Academy, which would become Pacific University. In 1879, he went to school there. So about 24 years of age, he gets his teaching certificate and becomes a teacher. That isn't profitable in those days, and he had a love for the law. So in 1882, he went to work for the great Thomas Tongue, who you've heard me talk about. There are now 4 or 5 Thomas Tongues in a succession, one after the next. The original was the dude. They are all incredible lawyers, but Thomas Tongue, the first, became a U.S. Senator out of Hillsboro, went to Congress, maybe our greatest lawyer in terms of his total span of work in the history of Hillsboro. But W.W. Barrett, William W. Barrett, no slouch, he became a lawyer. In 1884, he was entered into the bar. He became one of the most respected lawyers, again, a tactician, great with the law, great with writing laws, great with interpreting laws. During that time, or about that same time, he had served as district attorney, state representative, and then went on to become a state senator. So we're talking about a very, very significant early pioneer who not only lived in Washington County in Hillsboro, but he made his whole entire run through his life and his career, raised his family right here, built that home at 183 Southeast 6th. So the house gets its prominence from him and from its design. It's really quite something. We move down to the lower part of this. He was married to Lucretia Parrish. Let me go back up here. He had the children. Their children were Ira, William, and John. So I don't know much about Ira and John, but I'll tell you about William. This is the subject of our discussion tonight. William was a local boy, attended Hill High. He would have graduated, if I got my numbers right here, in about 1910, I think. He was in the Argus and other articles and just in people that had written about him. He was a wild, hard-to-control kid. I'm assuming the family had money. He was probably a fairly privileged child to have grown up in a home of that stature. But he was known as a fast young man, quote unquote. That came from an article. Ken Bilderbach might have actually contributed that, but that came from an article by Finn J.D. John, written last year. Actually, a feature was written about this guy. So this guy's not an unknown scallywag, this William we're talking about. Because the kid was wild, his father sent him off to the U.S. Naval Academy. Back then, you had to be top of your class, but you could also just be quote-unquote sent to the Naval Academy. Nowadays, you won't get in unless you've got 4.0 stature or better. Here, the next slide here, you see William Diamond Bill Barrett. Over on the right-hand side, there he is, the dapper dandy. That shot was probably shot in the 1920s, I'm guessing, or maybe mid-teens. So let's talk about William W. Barrett's son, William Barrett, Diamond Bill Barrett. He graduated from Hill High, top of his class. We talked about this. Attended the U.S. Naval Academy right out of high school, 1910 to 1911. So he was on that path. Dad wanted him straightened out. The stuff I've read about it is Dad was fed up with him. He was already a troublemaker. Might have been a good student and all that, but he was no doubt a womanizer. He was wild. He was just a wild, privileged kid. But he drops out or is kicked out of the Naval Academy. That's not very hard to do. You step out of line, you're gone. Even though Dad is a senator and has money, it didn't last. In 1911, in San Francisco, our young William Barrett shows up, and all the writings about this guy is that he's partly a narcissist, but he's moreover, maybe he's a bit of a sociopath, but he is an extreme silver-tongued con man. Okay, this guy is selling snake oil. He's the ultimate carny barker, smooth talker, sweetheart womanizer. He used his silver tongue to convince a jeweler in San Francisco to let him walk out of the store with a $2,000 ring, which was worth $55,000 in those days. Imagine that. And he's very young. I mean, he might have been 19 or 20 at that time. He claimed he had a wife and he was going to take the jewel home to show her and that they would then purchase it. He had no wife. He pawned the ring for $1,500. So he takes the ring out of a jewelry store, takes it down to a pawn shop, says, this is a ring I own. It's valued at X, Y, and Z, and I want to pawn it. The pawn shop gives him $1,500 in cash back in those days. Think about that. This is 1910. You couldn't get $1,500 for a good diamond right now if you had one. I mean, you could, but this is some kind of ring he has. Then, instead of just running off with the pawn shop with the ring, he legitimizes the transaction by going back to the jeweler, telling the jeweler, hey, my wife loves it. I'm going to buy it from you on payments. How about 3 payments of $500? The jeweler agreed. Not Diamond Bill yet. Bill Barrett gives him the $500 and then takes off with the diamond. So he scored big time. He had $1,000 in his pocket. The ring was at the pawn shop. The jeweler thought he was going to get 2 more payments of $500 and have done well on his diamond. William could have been long gone and living the life. Instead, he turns around and doubles down and tries the scheme again. A police officer caught wind of what was going on and was caught Bill in the act of the second transaction there in San Francisco. They take him to court. The judge throws out the case, saying he actually did buy both rings on credit, and because he bought them on credit, he had a right to pawn them. So from a legal standpoint, he actually had debts he owed 2 jewelers, but he had not defrauded on the debt, so the charges were dropped. Senator Barrett gets contacted from San Francisco, has to basically pay for both of the rings to bail his son Diamond Bill out. That's when he got the name Diamond Bill. There was some mystery over how he got that name, and you'll see here in a little bit. There's a lot more jewelry being philandered by this guy than just some diamonds. So scam number 2, I'm going to call them scams because they are. He makes a move in 1914 on Kathleen Bailey. Now, there's some confusion over who this woman really was, but 2 newspaper articles named her Kathleen Bailey or Biley. He marries her in 1914. Her father was one of the top 5 wealthiest men in Washington. Okay, so Bill is a man of keen senses. You'll see through the rest of the story. He likes that money crowd, and he knows how to manipulate them and how to manipulate everyone around him. So he's a chameleon of sorts. He's a social climber, a great Gatsby, if you will. And maybe that's what he wanted to be. I don't know. He takes young Miss Bailey, Kathleen Bailey, and they move to New York. That doesn't last very long. A divorce immediately follows, probably because, I'm guessing it's because her father wasn't buying the fact that certainly Bill was looking for money. He wasn't a man that appeared to want to work too hard. There is 2 articles saying that they had a son together. I have yet to been able to pin that down. That's going to be another whole discussion. If they did have a son in that 1914, 1915 era, boy, what a great story that kid might have to tell, or that family might have to tell. That child's probably long gone. So here we have scam number 2, Diamond Bill, his first marriage to Kathleen Bailey. Now, World War I comes, and he's left Kathleen Bailey. He's bored. He immediately enlists in the Army Air Corps, and he serves in France. He becomes a captain immediately. The word is that he served notably. I can't figure out if he was a pilot or not, but he went to France during World War I. He was given some recognitions. There's not evidence that he did anything heroic, but he got himself named captain during World War I. And he began after that to call himself Captain Bill, or please address me as Captain Bill. He tried to leave behind the Diamond Bill nickname folks back here in Hillsboro in California had labeled him with. Okay, the war ends, and here it gets interesting. In 1919, he sweeps young Alice Drexel, New York debutante, off of her feet. They quickly elope without the blessings of the high society Drexels. Now, the Drexels are, you're talking about robber baron, crust of the high crust. Okay, they are the little particles of fine sugar on top of the creme brulee. They are as high as you get. I read an article that said old man Drexel, 2 generations back, left Alice's father $33 million in wealth in 1919. So let that settle in for a minute. And you're talking about money beyond money. They were people who never came up above the heights. They never came down to mix with people. And this was unheard of. So the term elope, and actually the whole concept of an elopement, our young Diamond Bill actually, from my readings, put the spin on this thing in a way that had never been done. In fact, eloping became a big kind of a thing that rich girls did, and then others as well, after Diamond Bill pulled off this elopement. They basically fall in love quickly. She's a ninny-headed, rich young girl who really is sheltered. She's cloistered, never really been out. So you'll see here in a minute, they actually get in a car. They orchestrate a marriage away from the family's estate. He orchestrates bags being packed and all of that. They go back and actually face the family, tell them what has happened, and the family then has what they call a festival of love, where the family surrounds them and says they will forgive this unsanctioned marriage and it will all be good from there on out. But the father lets them know there'll be no money being offered until things are worked out between them. So what happens is they head for Europe immediately on a quote-unquote honeymoon. They have little between them, and the couple lives off of Alice's jewelry and the cash she was able to stuff into some bags. That is great for a few months. Within a few months, Alice, the rich debutante of the Drexel family, is now living in squalor. They've run out of money, and she's pregnant. So Bill, our wonderful Hillsboro boy Bill, Diamond Bill, he leaves her in France, and he goes to London to meet a quote-unquote friend of the family, Cydia Wirt Spreckles. She had married John D Spreckles, sugar and railway magnate. Have you heard of Spreckles sugar? Some of you will remember this, and I remember as a kid being able to buy Spreckles sugar. But the Spreckles were sugar brokers out of San Francisco, San Diego. And they worked the California and Hawaii sugar trade, which became known as C&H Sugar. I don't remember that. I don't remember the darn jingle, but C&H Sugar was Spreckles holding. John Spreckles Sr. drove the Silver Spike in the Arizona-California Railway. We'll talk about him in a minute. So here now we have Diamond Bill leaves behind the Drexel girl to go to London to meet with a quote-unquote friend of the family in Cydia Wirt Spreckles. And what happens then is where things get real dicey. So the story goes that Bill talks her into letting him take her priceless pearls and jewelry, which she was wearing in London, that she had been giving on her wedding about that same time by John Spreckles Jr. In particular, some diamonds and a pearl necklace that was a massive pearl necklace of great value, valued by Sotheby's or Christie's at $120,000. That would put that necklace into the millions in today's dollars. So what happens? Bill convinces her, you should have that appraised and let me take them. We know each other, and she agreed. He said, I'll bring them right back in a day or two, cleaned up and all appraised, and we'll have Lloyd's of London or Sotheby's or one of these houses properly care for them and appraise them. So what happens then? Bill hops on a freighter to the United States, leaves Alice, his pregnant, rich, debutante wife, who now has no means. She's incommunicado from her family. And it turns out John Spreckles, Cydia Wirt Spreckles' husband, is off in Norway in business. When he gets back to London and finds out the pearls are missing, he calls Scotland Yard. So now our Hillsboro boy is missing with diamonds and necklaces and pearls missing. And his now wife, Alice Drexel, is living in basically a poor slum in France, and she won't message or send word to her family to come help. They certainly could have. She's pregnant, and it turns out that she waits until the last minute to call her parents for help because she thinks Bill's going to come back. He doesn't come back. The family went to Nice, France to collect her and to gather her up and care for her child. Unfortunately, her child died 10 months later, and part of it was just the whole affair itself. So what happens is Diamond Bill is on this steamer. He sort of is wanted by Scotland Yard. They're investigating the whole thing. And he turns up in LA. So the LA police pick him up. They hold him. They ask him questions. He says, I didn't do it. I don't have these jewels. Cydia Spreckles is lying. And I'm just here on a trip to prepare to make a movie that I've been invited to be a part of. And there is a record that he tried to become an actor. Scotland Yard had not officially issued a warrant. Bill lawyered up and had a good lawyer, and his lawyer said, you got to let him go. There's no proof of theft. There's no warrants for his arrest, so they let him go. He's not even gone a couple of days before Scotland Yard officially issues the warrant, but Bill was gone, and he would never be captured. Time goes by now. By the 1920s, Bill is rumored to be in Mexico. Cydia Spreckles will speak about this issue and say that he's in Mexico. And then in 1932, 12 years later, he was arrested in Brazil for counterfeiting, where he did 6 years in a Brazilian prison. There are some unofficial reports that he is now, that he came back to the States many years later, and he's buried in Arlington National Cemetery. I have another report that he died in a jail in Brazil or in a South American country. I'm going to confirm this part of the story. Nonetheless, there's no record of Diamond Bill Barrett coming back to Hillsboro. Cydia Spreckles divorced John Spreckles later that year after the theft, and there was rumors that she was married after that to a Turkish prince, among others. We get into now the real theory behind all of this is that Cydia was supposedly, by the media accounts, a friend of Alice Drexel's, and Diamond Bill met her that way. But the more plausible theory is now that Cydia was a dance hall girl in San Francisco during Diamond Bill's diamond days, when he was philandering down there as a young man, stealing the diamonds. And the two of them may have been romantic, and it's possible that the two of them were both con artists and both planned on attaching themselves to these wealthy families. On the one hand, Diamond Bill goes after the Drexel fortune and out on the East Coast in New York, and Cydia Wirt was her name. She went after the Spreckles fortune. They went after the low-hanging fruit, a young debutante woman in Alice Drexel, and a young, strapping man of the world in John Spreckles Jr., and that the whole con was to get as much money as they could to extract these pearls and to kind of worm their way into the lives of these wealthy families. If that was the plan, they did it. So this became a worldwide media thing. It was an absolute frenzy. So here is a first of many articles I'm going to show you. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. Sunday Oregonian was just enamored with this whole story. How Miss Drexel managed her own elopement. And unlike the old days when timid maids awaited masterful Romeos, this modern Juliet drives herself away, picks up her waiting lover, and whisks him off to be wedded. And there's actually a step-by-step, steps 1 through 5, and it states exactly where they went. And step 3, at the appointed place in Bronx Park, Captain Barrett and his best man emerge from concealment and are welcomed by the resourceful Juliet. They whisk along roads to New Rochelle, and Miss Drexel drives the gallant captain to the minster where they are married, and the trousseau and bridegroom are safely together, etc., etc., etc. Here's kind of breaks this down. So they actually did an infographic showing the the Duesenberg or the Austin car of that era, sweeping them away. And here's the players in that wedding. Here's the lovely Alice Drexel in these two, the crown shot, the two pictures of the female. That's Mrs. John Drexel, who sustained objections to various other suitors, caused her friends to say her daughter caused them to elope when any man came along, because her mother was overbearing, wouldn't let her see men. So she was rather ready to jump. And Diamond Bill was only too willing to accommodate. And it actually shows steps 4, them being married on their knees before the pastor, and step 5 is them rushing off. And so some of this was the first historically recorded new woman elopement was an unqualified success. So this was considered part of the women's movement. It came out of suffrage and all that, of how powerful women could be, where a young woman could direct and stand in the face of her, of her parents. Below that, later, Mama and Papa Drexel were notified. It's certain that for a time, things must have been distressing. They even issued a statement, an unheard of thing in Drexel circles so far as purely personal matters are concerned. The statement is, Mr. and Mrs. Drexel have not had the pleasure of meeting Captain Barrett and know nothing whatsoever about him. Their daughter's wedding is therefore both a surprise and a shock. But a day or so later, all four spend an evening together, and everyone supposes that everything is all right for the former Miss Drexel's sake. Everyone hopes it is. She has no source of income in her own, despite her family's enormous wealth. Captain Barrett has no money either, but he says he can easily earn all that and his wife that his wife will need, which is decidedly optimistic on his part, as his bride has been reared in the most sumptuous lap of luxury and has no more idea of the value of a dollar than an unborn baby. It gets into there is a Drexel family member down here talks that there are the proud Maidstones. This is a family. Margarita Drexel, the Viscountess, is said to have grown prouder than the tradition she married, are not likely to accept the Barretts as equals. These were extremely wealthy family in Europe, known as the Maidstones, and Margarita Drexel was a Viscount in Europe, and they apparently tried to connect with her in Europe. But here's those players. Here's John Armstrong Drexel. This is Alice Drexel's father. This is the man that really, he built Drexel University. He went on to huge fortune and fame, but he did collect the fortune of Anthony J. Drexel of Philadelphia, who left a $30 million fortune. Her father, John Armstrong, got most of that. Her cousin is Viscountess Maidstone, Margarita Drexel, and the Maidstones are noted even among the English nobility for their exclusiveness. She has known and been admired by kings, princesses, dukes, and such the like all over the world. So it looks like our buddy, our homeboy here, William Diamond Bill Barrett, is trying to get himself into the mix with our young Alice. And okay, some of you are seeing. I see. Okay, I'm just checking on you guys. I'm going to keep going. Let's keep going here. Now, here's our other player, Miss D Spreckles. She was a former lover and friend of Diamond Bill from his days in California? Question mark. This story, as it has unfolded over the years, it does look more and more like they were in the same place in California. She was a dance hall girl in the 1910, 1912, 1915, 1914 area that he was floating around there doing his con scheme. In 1920, the Oregonian did an extended expose on the sorrowful end of Alex Drexel's runaway romance. Abandoned by her husband when his love grew cold, left penniless in a foreign land on the eve of her baby's birth, was there ever a more dismal ending for an heiress's honeymoon? And it has pictures of the Newport home of the Drexels, where John R. Drexel has been entertaining lavishly, little dreaming that his daughter was face to face with actual poverty and suffering. There's some interesting passages here, somewhat. Just stating, and today, before society has hardly recovered from its astonishment at her surprising runaway marriage, so they were just getting over the fact that Alice Drexel had run away, young Miss Barrett is a heartbroken, delusioned woman, heartlessly abandoned by her husband when his love grew cold, left practically penniless among strangers in a foreign land, and on the eve of her baby's birth, and now, living on the money she formerly scorned for love, anxiously awaiting news of her family's forgiveness in what turns out to have been a most ill-advised adventure in matrimony. Her jewels and even some of her clothes were sold or pawned to secure money to pay for a meager food and lodging she could afford for herself. This would not have been necessary had she written to her father of her dire need, for John Drexel's love for his daughter, in fact, was greater than his pride. But Alice, too, was proud, too proud to make the appeal. The final touch of pathos is added to this real-life melodrama by the fact that Alice was lacking all the comforts an expectant mother should have. In actual true suffering, her mother, it goes on to talk about her mother was holding charity balls for the poor. And what of Captain Barrett? Is he still to be given so honorable a title, the man whose gallant war record contrasts so strangely with the tragedy in his marriage has ended? When the Drexels were informed of their daughter's marriage to an utter stranger, they spent thousands of dollars looking up his background. It was generally understood that they hoped to find cause for setting this marriage aside. Investigation instituted by Mrs. Drexel showed that Captain Barrett was born and educated in Hillsboro, Oregon. Woo! Hashtag Hillsboro strong. At least strong with at that time with this conniving social climber. I'm almost kind of proud of him, but I'm not. He made the Naval Academy at the end of his high school course. He is the son of the late ex-Senator William N. Barrett, lawyer, and Lucretia Parrish Barrett. He was a fine character in the parishes, meaning William, his father, was a fine character. And the parishes on the mother's side of the family were splendid people. And when Will became involved in a diamond escapade in San Francisco, it was a great shock to the entire Hillsboro area. The next Hillsboro heard of him was when he eloped with the daughter of Alexander Kerr. This is where we have a little bit difference in the articles by different newspapers. This one says Kerr. The other one was a woman named Bailey. Both of them said he was a Tacoma capitalist. Barrett has a son by this marriage, but he and his wife disagreed, and they were both divorced in Portland. Next, Barrett bobbed up as a lieutenant in France, and then romantic marriage to Miss Drexel. It's a sorrowful conclusion that became public. We go on to the Portland, November 20th, 1920. So these articles are coming out basically from 1919 on. And here's a whole psychological profile on why rich girls marry poor men. And it goes on and repeats some of the things that we knew here already. Talks about John Spreckles of California has asked the police to find Captain Barrett, and the jewels amounting to $80,000 in loss. Salem Capital Journal, 1920, reports from Reno that Mrs. John Spreckles, wife of the wealthy Californian, has leased a residence as Mrs. Smith, quote unquote. Last October, Mrs. Spreckles' visit to London was suddenly shortened by the disappearance of $100,000 worth of jewelry entrusted by her to Captain William Barrett, former husband of Alice Drexel of Philadelphia. Barrett, to whom the jewels were given to have them cleaned and reset, was located in Los Angeles. After his departure, he was released by the Los Angeles police because of insufficient evidence. You can see both of these women are attractive. This is Cydia Spreckles. At this point, she's missing her jewelry. Her husband's upset at her, and we know that she was filing for divorce at the same time. I wanted to jump over to the Spreckles thing a little bit because I brushed into the Spreckles family in Lanai, in the island of Lanai, which is the beautiful island off the coast of Maui. And that's owned by Rupert Murdoch now. But at one time, I did the research. C&H Sugar owned that island, and I want to say the Spreckles family owned that island. Here's a little bit about him, and you can find this guy on Wikipedia. So this is John Diedrich Spreckles Sr. This would be the Cydia Spreckles' husband, John Jr.'s father. This guy's a hard charger. I mean, and these two men, William Diamond Bill Barrett's dad is a senator. He's the pride of Hillsboro on the legal front. They have money, much smaller money than this, but basically, the city of Spreckles went after a very wealthy man's son, and Diamond Bill goes after a very, very wealthy family's daughter, sort of using their physical wiles and their charms to attract these people. John Diedrich Spreckles, I mean, this guy was here he is driving the Golden Spike in the Arizona-California Railway. He built the streetcars in San Diego. The family has a huge mansion outside of San Diego in Coronado. And many of you will know this Hotel Coronado you see in the bottom here. That was built by John Diedrich Spreckles. So had City of Spreckles just stayed married to John Spreckles, theoretically, she had every chance of absorbing a lot of money through that family, especially having a child with them. And she did, in fact, have this young son here. And this is where this history would get interesting, because some of these people's lives are still in being. We could actually connect to them and ask some questions about the story. It's interesting that the Spreckles family recently did some kind of a connection to their past, which is checkered with these kinds of incidents, and really tried to atone for some of the things that had happened to them. I've actually been to the Hotel Coronado. It is fantastic. So Spreckles built the railway, built the streetcar line. I mean, he was big time. A little bit later in 1920, so now we're in 1920, extradition of Barrett is sought. Britain applies formally at Los Angeles. Theft of jewels have been charged. English sleuths are active. So I know Debbie Raber has mentioned to me that Scotland Yard was in Hillsboro, we believe, at some point, sniffing around, looking for signs of Diamond Bill, looking for anybody here that knew him. He had been far removed from Hillsboro by that time. It's possible he was in communication with his father, William Barrett, the senator, by that time, but it's very possible that they had turned their backs completely on him. Of course, it's hard to say. I mean, he did go fight in World War I. And the thing was, Diamond Bill had a reason for everything. This whole thing talks about the necklaces were actually, these necklaces actually didn't include just the pearls, but included some very expensive diamonds, that Tiffany's was involved, that Barrett actually helped City of Spreckles get credit to be able to obtain these necklaces. And so Tiffany's actually settled with the Spreckles family after the necklaces disappeared and Barrett was not caught. The Spreckles family paid $80,000 to settle this. So wherever these jewels went and these things went, they were sort of paid for. So whoever ended up with them had something that had been sort of taken care of and swept under the rug. 1921, the story still keeps going here in the Oregonian and beyond. And it gets into the pearls that turned to tears. And first, John H. Spreckles paid $80,000 for them. His wife wore them at Alice Drexel's husband undertook to have them insured. And now distressing complications involving deception, divorce, and death have followed the precious gems' disappearance. This actually got into the fact that the pearls, because pearls, when they're not worn by a human being, change from a life-giving thing to a life-taking thing. This is an old belief in pearls. And this article I can give you the story on is very full of such passages. And here's a really good shot that the paper did of these people. You know, Diamond Bill on the left, his wife down on the bottom right, and then the other woman, quote unquote, in the middle with her little son and the pearls hanging over. This gets into, so this version of the story, which I won't get into too much, basically says that City Spreckles, as they called her, knew Alice Drexel and that she had met Captain Barrett at a lunch. And he went on to ask her, "Don't you have these insured?" She says, "No, I don't." He says, "Well, you better let me have them. Don't neglect this any longer." She said, "Well, you're a war hero and you're respected. You're a captain of the military and you're with the Drexel girls, so of course I'll trust you." And that's when he took them and then didn't come back. Let's see. There's several other statements here that talk about different versions of the story. Here in the middle, the skinny yellow arrow says, but the cup of sorrow still contained a bitter draught. Her 10-month-old baby, Gerald Edwin Barrett, was the greatest comfort she had. This is referring to Alice Drexel. During those times, it was in his care that kept her mind occupied. She loved to wash and dress him and to shower him, and all of the other million attentions that a mother bestows. Then one day recently, the baby was stricken ill. Expert medical attention was unavailing. The child died after a brief illness. And the man who seems to be blamed for all the troubles, who released the ill luck from these pearls as soon as they were taken from their owner, what of him? That is what society is asking. Disgrace and banishment were his fate, and somewhere on the face of the earth he began wandering, none knew where. Captain Barrett was found shortly after he arrived here. The police of Los Angeles apprehended him, but the police then had not received from England the formal charge made against Barrett, so he was released. Later, when they again sought him, he had disappeared. And it gets into a number of other background checks about Barrett. This guy had been working on this for a long time. In 1920, this article talks a lot about why they didn't catch him. And here where this yellow star is, the British consul's office stated they have no advice regarding the case, and they have not received advice from England. It was then that Herman Klein, detective sergeant who accompanied Barrett to the consul's office, released Barrett. The case turned out exactly as I knew it would, declared Barrett immediately after his release. I knew I had done nothing to be afraid of. For that reason, I took the matter as coolly as possible. I'm going to wash up and change my clothing and rest up. Will you stay in Los Angeles? He was asked. There's no reason why I shouldn't, except the notoriety this has brought on me. I intend to stay, unless I change my mind for some time at least. The notoriety, of course, has been unpleasant. I've always noticed that. When charges are brought against a man, the newspapers have much to say, but when he's released, you will find a little piece stuck away with the advertisement. What are your plans regarding the case? He was asked. I haven't thought about that much. I would want to talk with things over with my attorney before saying anything. And it goes on to say he had agreed to let a detective stay with him, and there's a bunch of other details here. He had all kinds of excuses about why he was not hard to find, and he tried to claim he was here in the United States on an acting trip. In 1920, Mrs. Spreckles is on the record. This is Cydia saying that the captain took her items, and here where the yellow arrow points. My only fear is that he has escaped to Mexico. Before arriving in London, I made inquiries as to what could be done. I found out it would be practically impossible to extradite him. However, I hope he can be brought to justice someday. Asked what made her believe Barrett was in Mexico, she said, that is the place where a man of his type would likely go. Mrs. Spreckles was then asked if the value of the jewelry was $100,000, as had been reported in London. She said, a great deal more than that. There was a pearl necklace. One was worth $16,500. This has been turned into Tiffany's in London. By the way, some of the best pearls are missing off of it. Do you know who returned that necklace to Tiffany's? No, I know that somebody turned it in, but it had changed hands 3 or 4 times. She went on to confirm the story that she'd given him the diamonds and that she didn't know where they were, etc. September 26th, the warrant finally arrives. Barrett is gone. Former Oregon officer disappears as British embassy asks for his arrest. The family went on. The family of the Drexel family found out what his military record was. It said, born November 5th, 1889, residence Portland, Oregon, at Naval Academy from Oregon, graduated there in 1910, served as a midshipman on Maryland 6 months, resigned 1911, commissioned first lieutenant, September 27th, 1917, promoted to captain in air service, October 24th, 1980, served overseas and was honorably discharged from the air service at Garden City, L.I., March 19th, 19. Nearest relative was Mrs. Albert Ordway, Stone Lake Court, Washington. So there is a clear record. He was in the military, was in the Naval Academy, dropped out, and then came back to the military from 1927 to 1919. There's then, in closing in 1922, now this whole affair is sort of over. They did a wrap-up in the Sunday Oregonian. People were just fascinated by this story. So it was all over in these incredible write-ups and these Sunday specials. Deserted with her baby abroad after her elopement, the darling of millions is again to shine on Fifth Avenue on condition that she drop her husband's name. Miss Alice Drexel Barrett, the beauty, who will again shine in society. So what they did, the Drexels brought her back into high society. They reinvented her, got rid of the Barrett name. There's not a lot of word about what happened to the baby. There's a couple more articles here about how he's being sought for this huge theft. There was just a lot of press. I found this one very odd thing right here. And this is from much later. This little thing with here says private lives. Captain William Barrett in 1919 eloped with Alice Gordon Drexel of the Philadelphia banking family. Disappeared soon after when he was accused of stealing $125,000 worth of jewels from Mrs. John D Spreckles, San Francisco. Recently, he turned up in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania hospital with 4 cents and a bad case of amnesia. His estranged wife lives abroad. And that's apparently him. It doesn't really look like him, but I guess it could be a thin version of him. This came out like in the later 1920s, and that was in a little society magazine I found. And sadly, John D. Spreckles Jr., who was the sugar king that married the city of Spreckles woman, he dies all of a sudden before he and his wife finalized their divorce in an automobile accident. And he's sort of driving along some backcountry road, a curb at high speed. He was alone. His body was found by a driver for a marketing firm of Taft, who took the body to the office of Dr. Page. After preliminary examination, Dr. Page rushed the urgent man to Bakersfield, where an operation was performed. He had a broken skull, and he died. This was kind of a sad ending for him. The article about the pearls talked about those pearls killing everybody that touched them. So that became a whole thing. And just before I went on the air, I just couldn't get over this idea that City of Spreckles had married some Turkish prince. And in fact, I did find a New York Times article from October 1st, 1929. Princess Shakir wins a divorce at Reno. Former city, which is what they call her, City Wirt Spreckles, Cydia Wirt Spreckles, charged her Turkish husband with not supporting her. And then to the right of this, not much later, December 8th. So over here, October 1st, she gets divorced from this Turkish prince. Over here on the right, former City Wirt weds for the fourth time, ex-wife of J.D. Spreckles Jr. and Turkish prince. Marries Lieutenant R.A. Gardner of the Army Air Corps. Interesting. The Army Air Corps is the same group that our good friend Diamond Bill was with. So the more I look at this, the more I want to know about this person, this City Wirt. She's in the middle of this thing, and there's articles later where Diamond Bill is saying she did it. She conned me into all of this, and she took everything from me. This actually tells who all she married. She married Harry Williams first, and then John D. Spreckles, millionaire member of the San Francisco Spreckles. Then 3, Prince Saud Shakir, Turkish prince. Then 4, Roger Allen Gardner. CD has 1 child, Geraldine Spreckles. So Geraldine Spreckles would have been alive in the 1920s. She's probably gone now, but she probably has family. She was apparently a chorus girl, City Spreckles was, and or actress before she married John Spreckles. Does anyone have information about her career? This is then a later story in which Mrs. Spreckles is going on and on about how the captain went too far, and she then admits that the two of them were friends, and that up here considered him a good friend. Mrs. Spreckles said she went with Barrett, Diamond Bill, to the races, saw him frequently, and considered him quite a good friend of hers and her husband's. This is the first time that's come up that he actually knew the husband. She said he was with her when she bought the heart-shaped necklace, which cost $80,000, and after the purchase, he strongly urged her to have it insured. He told me it was foolish to wear such a valuable string without insuring it. He said he knew just the place for such a transaction. He would handle the details for me if I wished. I saw no reason for his argument. I was busy, so I let him take the string to arrange the insurance. Also, about the same time, he kept telling me that my diamonds needed cleaning and probably it would be wise. The result was he took the diamonds. It was ridiculous of him to say that he accompanied me to Regent Street where I sold the hearts. So she goes on to defend the fact that she says that Diamond Bill ended up saying that he never had the diamonds, that she had them. So this whole thing ends up just being a mess. So, what an interesting story. Complex in some ways, but not. Hillsboro boy, Diamond Bill. He's involved with 3 scandals. Why he's married to Alice Drexel. He gets her pregnant. He's not very bright because if he stays with Alice Drexel, he gets a piece of that $33 million. There's no way the family leaves her cut off. There's just no way. But you got the woman in the middle here, and you got these jewels and diamonds, and you got a fast-moving guy. And I don't think he was smart enough to slow down. He was basically, this is the perspective of this. Also, in thinking about this, everyone, is the Spanish flu was going on during the 2 years of this story. So how much death and destruction and dismay was going on around them, how they dodged that flu, how they were able to skirt high society and all that. There's never mentioned in these stories, but clearly that things were easier to navigate for people that were up to ill will or for things that weren't savory. Innocent age-old story, right? Some people use love as a weapon. Some people use money as a weapon. So now you know the story of Diamond Bill Barrett, of William Barrett, and of the W.W. Barrett house, as I scroll back up. So from that house sprang up one of the greatest lawyers and his family, and one of certainly the biggest scallywag in Diamond Bill Barrett. This is Dirk Knudsen for We Remember Hillsboro. I don't have a lot of these big stories like this up my sleeve. This one's been sitting for a while. I'm grateful that you joined in. I guess I'll come on and give you all the Hillsboro Strong. I got a Hillsboro Strong symbol up here that I put on my window. But hey, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to end the broadcast and hopefully it recorded. 51 minutes long. That's it. Love you guys. Everybody. Let me do that. Love. See you later, gang.